I'm Charlie Melcher, founder of the Future of Storytelling. Welcome to the FoST podcast. Today, I'm excited to share a conversation with my friend Alex Poots, the founding CEO and artistic director of The Shed. Since opening in 2019, The Shed has become an important cultural institution in New York City. It's known for hosting and commissioning innovative and original works by established and early career artists across a broad range of mediums. Alex's remarkable career has spanned institutions like the Manchester International Festival, the Park Avenue Armory, and Tate Galleries in London. He's worked with artists across genres and generations, from composers to visual artists to technologists, and at every step, bringing ambitious, interdisciplinary projects to life. The Shed is more than just a venue. It was created to serve the artists of our time, adaptable, collaborative, and designed to support experimentation in the arts. Under Alex's leadership, it's become a home for genre-defying performances, bold commissions, and unexpected encounters between artists and audiences. In our conversation today, we take a deep dive into The Shed. We talk about risk, trust, collaboration, and the evolving role of cultural institutions as platforms for innovation and storytelling. Please join me in welcoming Alex Poots to the FoST podcast. Alex, welcome to the Future of Storytelling podcast.
Thank you, Charlie.
It's such a pleasure to have you here with me today. I've been looking forward to this conversation for actually much longer than you know. Let me start by asking you, what is The Shed and what's its purpose?
The Shed, in my opinion, is a response to the 21st century. It acknowledges that any kind of civilized city culture needs places that celebrate the past and that really preserve and cherish the past. But from the Shed's perspective, we do need places that explore the future. Really, I think the idea that just made me want to move to America, which I did about 10 years ago, was this idea that really this was the first time in New York that a new art center was being built, and that there was an opportunity to be a place for the 21st century that is as much about invention as it is about interdisciplinarity, that could bring together leading figures, whether they're well-known or early career, from performing arts, from visual arts, and from pop culture. That there was no kind of high or low, that there were great people from all walks of life. Could that place exist on Manhattan? And if it could, oh my God, I have to try and get involved. And that's what happened.
It's amazing. And I appreciate that you differentiate it immediately from something like a museum or a cultural institution that's championing one form of art and maybe the great practitioners of that art form. So in a way, so many institutions are looking backwards. And you came to create or help create The Shed with this intention of looking forwards and collaborating with people who are inventing the future. How is that built into the institution itself?
Yes, and just to build on what you're saying, we need places that preserve the great works of the past, if only to know what to do with the future, because we learn from the past. So they're completely symbiotic and they're both essential. The architects, led by Liz Diller in collaboration with David Rockwell, were still designing the building. One of the first things I asked if they would consider doing, which they did do, was to not only turn the third gallery into a fully functioning theatre, but to raise the ceiling by almost 6 feet, because we needed the height. We also needed to turn the gallery that could turn into theatre from a 300 capacity theatre to a nearly 600 capacity theatre. And of course, the height allows you to have more rows of seats. The other part of the building moves. The entire room, it's this 40 metre by 40 metre by 40 metre, gorgeous, big open space. And that also had a major redesign made to it in conversation with the architects and the board.
But the idea that one of the major spaces moves, I mean, there's not a lot of architecture. Normally you're building a fixed box and the walls and the floors and the ceilings are all set. You have literally a building that is adaptable, that's flexible, that you can make bigger or smaller. Parts of it is on a track and it can roll out. And then there's flexibility internally to configure it for different types of performance, for different types of analog and digital needs. Like just the idea that the building wasn't built for one very tightly defined set of needs, but rather to be able to be in dialogue and responsive to the artists and the curators who knows what they were going to make in it. Like they were literally going to be able to create in this building and the building would work with them to do it.
You've expressed it perfectly, actually. I wish you'd been in the pictures with us when we were fundraising for this. If you imagine a matchbox, okay, and the fixed building is the inside of the matchbox, and the moving part sits over the fixed building and rolls out over it, and then back over it, a bit like a matchbox moves in and out. That fixed building is by far, obviously, our largest building because it contains, when it rolls back, all 4 levels. The 2 galleries, the theatre, and the top floor. The redesign was significant. I mean, I think in terms of total budget, the redesign for the theatre and the main space was in the tens of millions. But what it did for the main space, which has proved to be vital, I would say, was to create this new technology, almost at the touch of a button. These shades come in, and they not only control the entire light environment to go to completely to black, which you need for performance, which you need for digital projection, you need for all kinds of things, pop concerts. But they also, and this is why it delayed it, because no one had ever made it before, the material had to be thick enough to contain the sound. And what I'd asked, rather possibly egregiously from the architect's perspective, but it was certainly a big ask, we had to be able to get up to 107, 108 decibels in there without upsetting the neighbours. And some people will say, well, why does it move? Of course, in the summer, we can roll back, and for 8 to 10 glorious weeks, we can do outdoor programming. We have an outdoor plaza on the footprint of the indoor space.
Right. So how does this concept of a responsive building or the kind of flexibility that you designed and conceived the space for relate to your curatorial approach?
Here, it's almost like the hardware is also software. And what do I mean by that? It actually dates from an enlightened architect called Cedric Price, who wanted to make his buildings not the architecture of buildings, but the building was the infrastructure for the show. The show would be, in a way, informing what the building was. Rather than the building informing what the show was. Obviously, that building was never made. It was so ahead of its time. But actually, Liz Diller and our collaborating architect, David Rockwell, took that and really pushed it further than I think anyone has ever done. Because we have this big building, the big space, that can, it's completely controlled light and sound. It moves. It can be seated, standing. It really is a kind of a format shifter.
Mm-hmm. So talk about the range of curation, the range of work that you've demonstrated.
Yeah, I mean, if we just look at the opening, okay, in our big space, we decided for the first show to make it a standing environment. So we worked with Steve McQueen, Quincy Jones, an amazing academic called Maureen Mahon from New York University. And they crafted a concert series that gave the audience opportunities to hear the family tree of African-American music through time, performed live. So you'd hear the journey of the music through time, leading to Beyonce or to a great jazz living artist. Right off the bat, in the same space, 2 weeks after that had finished, we opened with Bjork, 1,300-seat environment, the most technologically advanced concert I'd ever seen. It then went on and toured arenas. So what we were doing there was moving from a 2,000 concert environment to building a show for an arena tour that premiered at the Shed. Meanwhile, in the gallery, we had Gerhard Richter with Steve Reich making new work, and in the next room next to it, Gerhard Richter with Arvo Pärt. And then upstairs, we had the great poet Anne Carson write a dramatic melologue for both Ben Whishaw and Renee Fleming. And that was all happening at the same time.
Right.
But I think the holy grail that became very clear to me even before we opened was that not only could we do all of these things almost shoulder to shoulder, but the real nirvana moment was when they started coercing, when they started to kind of become interdisciplinary. And I think for the curious audience and for the adventurous and, dare I say, risk-taking audience, you know, the idea that Anne Carson, the great poet from Canada, wrote a melologue, which actually is a dramatic monologue. It's a piece of theatre where they sing as well as speak. And to have one of, if not the greatest living female singer for the stage, for opera, for leader, Renee Fleming, to work with Ben Whishaw, one of our great actors, to create a new format. I mean, really, no one had seen that before. So, of course, the public were largely delighted, but the press were very divided. They were like, well, what's this like? And you're like, well, hopefully it's not like anything else. You know, but a lot of people, it's quite rear view mirror. If it's not like something, they're a bit lost and they don't know what to say. But suddenly we realized, oh, here is a toolkit almost. It's like a building that's a toolkit that can work to both inspire and to help artists explore new landscapes and explore the future of storytelling, of music making, and of interdisciplinary art making.
Alex, you've always been somebody who was wildly curious, brings a tremendous intelligence and understanding of history, of different media together, to your curation, to your work. And so much of it seems to drive towards this idea of interdisciplinary work, of getting people from different backgrounds to collaborate, or even just having those works in proximity to each other. So they're having a dialogue for the person who's going through the building and seeing more than one of them. What is it about the nature of interdisciplinary work that is so exciting and appealing to you?
I think it's born from, you know, I was a trumpet player as a child. In my early career, that's what I did as a profession. You know, I used to move from pop music to classical music to jazz. They were all important to me. I didn't have a hierarchy. Certainly back then in the UK, you know, classical sat on top, then jazz was kind of, you know, it's good, it's fine. And then pop within the artistic canon was seen as, I mean, they actually called it low art. And to me, that was so dismissive, and it almost felt like this human-made social structure. It was almost like a class system for the arts. It also felt not true. You know, I worked with a very young, sadly, because he died so young, I worked with Jeff Buckley when I was in my late 20s. I produced his last concert. I can't think of anyone who sung Corpus Christi by Benjamin Britten any better, which he sang in the show we did. He also sang Hallelujah. And I can't think that Corpus Christi, by one of Britain's greatest classical composers and opera composers, is better than a Leonard Cohen song or a Joni Mitchell song or, you know, or a piece of music by Miles Davis. They're all at their height best in class. And so when an artist says, I want to try and work and realize this new piece of art, for me, it's the greatest gift and joy is along the way, if actually you need to pull someone from this other discipline in to help realize the outcome of the artistic endeavor. The consequence of that is that then you also simultaneously have different audiences coming to that project. And for me, that's the kind of world I'd like to live in, somewhere that's where you've got a big central space and it's driven by the artistic necessity, but it welcomes so many more different kinds of people into that central space. And it's endlessly interesting and beguiling for me.
One of the things I see you saying is that the cross-disciplinary nature, that's like a public value in a way of the cultural institution, is as a common space for the community, for many communities to simultaneously gather.
And of course, that has no boundaries in terms of who gets to do that. I mean, coming up now, we've got one of the great interdisciplinary directors, Felix Barrett, who's the founder of Punch Drunk, who many of your listeners will have been to his Sleep No More. His first show, which is still on at the Shed for another, we've just extended it. It's called Viola's Room, and that is like an exhibition. It's in a gallery, you walk through it, but it's also a story. And you hear it through this very advanced binaural headphone technology. But it's also theatrical because you come upon little sets that are lit, kind of a melting pot of different formats to create a new type of storytelling. It's the future of storytelling. But you've got that, okay? So people are going to say, well, he's quite celebrated. But equally, we've just finished a 12-week exhibition of early career talent from the 5 boroughs of New York called Open Call. It's of any age, of any background. They have to be a New York resident in the 5 boroughs. We bring in 20 experts from around the city, and they actually select it with us. So it's very democratized in terms of who gets to choose these artists. And then they are given a fee, they're invested in, and their work is presented for free to the public.
So how has the institution changed post-COVID?
Great question. We opened in April 2019, so 10 months before COVID was declared. We'd been building up to this release, right out of the gate, running down the road. We'd had a great first 9 months, and we were about to announce our next season with some amazing artists. And literally 2 weeks before, we got shut down, as the rest of the world did. I'm kind of unbearably optimistic by nature. And I thought, okay, what can we do? We've got this new building. We ended up doing the first live performance to an audience after COVID. I think it was March 31 with Kelsey Lou. It was a kind of an opera by this singer-songwriter, pop star Kelsey Lou, who had helped open the shed and was in the Steve McQueen show. Because we had this very advanced building, very high ceilings, best air conditioning system, blah, 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 we had this flexible building where we could let people in off the plaza straight into the building. They didn't have to come up the escalator. It was remarkable. So I felt, in a way, so lucky to be able to be one of the venues that brought New York back into live performance. So, we pivoted, and we actually found that by opening up the field, it was there's this world of other great creators, and which is what I was always looking forward to, but we just did it sooner.
I wanted to ask you about taste. Because you have tremendous taste. You're making decisions, or you're working with a group of people to make decisions. Where does that come from, and how do you think about it? What appeals to you and how you make your decisions?
I'm very careful about, in the research I do into an artist, and I try and do my own version of peer reviewing, in that it's not just about what I love, and in fact there's things I put on that challenge me in terms of my own taste. But taste isn't like, oh, it's this guy at the shed who has his own taste, and if you don't fit into what he thinks is good or she thinks is good. Part of my job is to try and open up as much as possible to different styles. So it's not about that one artist. Art can be judged and valued in many, many different ways. And part of the joy I have in my job is to keep discovering different ways of valuing different things that I am sometimes blindsided by.
Now, I know that you are very supportive of the artists that you want to celebrate, and you're often trying to help them create original works or move their discipline, their practice forward. But that can be really tricky too, because new work doesn't always find an audience, or there's tremendous risk with that. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of attracted to all of that. So it gives you a very interesting job to figure out. And my job, I find often, is to help that artist find the resources, whether those are humans or technology or probably all of it, to constantly be the eyes of the audience that are not yet in the room. And so along the way, as these artists and creatives and technical folks are evolving the work, I find my job is to check in with them and go, well, have you thought about how that might be received? Or, if you thought of it this way, if it didn't make any difference to the artistic outcome, this might happen instead. It might open up to this type of audience who could really find solace and beauty in what you're making. And, half the time they go, great, let's do that. And the other half they say no for very good reasons. And, both answers are good. I always say, look, these are ideas. Most of them can go in the bin. As Steve McQueen says, best idea wins. Mm-hmm. And I found that has a really positive impact because the artists feel that they're supported by you, but you're not dictating in any way.
Right.
And that it's about the outcome. And I often find that you need to go through that process once with an artist before real trust has been built. And then it's the next show that you can really land something with them because there's, it's a human connection, there's trust. And trust is almost everything in this game.
Yeah. And has to be earned.
Yeah, and it has to be earned, yeah.
How else are you trying to invent the future of art and storytelling?
So there's a wonderful English guy who lives in France now called Ed Cook, who came very eccentric but brilliant. He read somewhere that Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, had created a spherical environment to hear music where you'd have over 100 speakers all around the circle and the audience would be suspended in the middle. And so you would be in the sound and all the speakers were focusing inwards. And so Ed came to me knowing that to create this sphere, there was probably only one place in New York that could do it, which was our big space, the Corp. Literally, that not only could we do it, but we could actually suspend it from the ceiling because our ceiling is so strong. It's built like a crane system. And Stockhausen tried to do this. He made a 3/4 version in the Osaka World Fair, but it wasn't the complete full 360 circle. Ed and I realized, well, there's an unfinished project there. Like no one's ever realized it. It's kind of forgotten about almost. Mm-hmm. And so we realized Stockhausen's vision, who in 20th century Western music is one of the giants. Without him, there's probably no Kraftwerk. And without Kraftwerk, there's not a lot of pop music that's electronic based. So that's an example, I think, where really art and technology and human invention are come together in a very interdisciplinary way. And it's not about box office income necessarily. It's literally about, because of course these things are expensive, so we need the box office to pay for them. But the overriding urge is about, we just want everyone to check this out.
I'm a big believer that the primary shift of storytelling in the 21st century is the breaking down of that old paradigm of media that is flat, fixed, two-dimensional, and passive, and by the way, also kind of antisocial. You're sort of sitting alone watching, versus this new age of stories or creative work where we are embodied, have agency. It's multisensorial, it's participatory, it's immersive, it's social. There's so many examples of this type of work that you celebrate and elevate, and it's all part of this shift to something that, frankly, is more human. I think that the idea that we're meant to sit passively back and watch television or watch a screen or lean over our phones with our two thumbs and do, this little typing thing. We didn't evolve that way as a species. We evolved to be dancing and singing together. You provide, the campfire for us to dance and sing around together.
Yes, I agree. Can I sign up, please? I'm reminded of a piece that I had the pleasure of helping bring to life. It was in the Sonic Sphere. For your listeners, if you just go online, put in The Shed, Sonic Sphere, you'll see this amazing globe hanging from the ceiling of the Shed's McCourt. And in it are seating banks of 250 seats, but some of them you can lie in, some of them you sit in, some of them, they're almost like deck chairs. And what you heard most of the time in there was this 124 speaker system, and you either heard Steve Reich's Music for 18 Musicians, or you heard the XX classic album, or you heard Yeji, who's this amazing New York artist. But then occasionally we would do a live piece. I remember asking Igor Levit. Now, Igor, maybe one of the 10 most gifted pianists alive right now in terms of classical music, and wide open in terms of his ability to take on new projects. And, here I am asking, would he come and do 2 performances at 240 seats each? And most people would go, yeah, whatever. Igor says yes. I ask him, could you do something really special? We decide, well, who's kind of one of the unsung geniuses of American musical history? And it's Morton Feldman. So he decided to do the Palais de Marie, and this piece is incredibly meditative. The Palais de Marie, it's very, very minimal. We invited the Thai visual artist Rik Tirvanija, who has a great understanding of Buddhism. Obviously, it sells out in minutes. And you just go online, check out the reviews. It's totally polarized. Some people loved it. Other people said it was the worst thing they ever went to. They probably wanted him to play Beethoven or something. I don't know. Why can't he play Beethoven at Carnegie Hall one day and come and do one of the most important American composers to have ever lived,
right.
Morton Feldman, who no one ever plays
right.
On the main stages, or virtually never play. Couldn't those coexist and we all be happy?
Well, again, to me, that's just an example of you giving permission to artists to be something else, to try something else, to let those walls come down or be flexible and rearranged for a different opportunity. And it also makes me realize that when you ask somebody to do something, the way their mind calculates a response is more about the provocation of, or the opportunity to do something completely outside of maybe the economic imperatives or the traditions that they've come from. And therefore, it is creatively liberating and incredibly exciting for them.
I mean, what has been, you say about the evolution of the shed, I can't tell you the joy it gives me that when I got a call from Tom Hanks's agent like 15 months ago saying, it's a crazy question. Would you sit down with Tom and have a conversation? He was like, duh, yes, of course. I should be so lucky. And so we have a Zoom call. And of course, he's as charming and humble as you'd imagine, and it's for real. But he wants to entrust us, the shed, with a new play he's written. Now, this is one of the most beloved storytellers of our times. This is something he said to me in the first meeting. He said, I've been writing it for years with my collaborator, Jim, and we need a home to bring this to life, and I will be in it. I'm desperately interested in doing this play. So our job was to kind of bring the plane in, kind of thing, and, surround him with amazing people. So we've got Kenny Leon, August Wilson's director of choice for his last plays, world premiere plays. It's great that now we've kind of set out our stall as, look, this is where you can try out risk-taking, adventurous things. And, they'll all be done very well. Will they all land? We don't know. Some of them might need, it's kind of chapter one of a right. new type of art form.
Yeah.
But, that's where I want to be.
Yeah. You are a natural promoter of these types of things, collaborator, but I really sort of see you as this Pied Piper leading us into the future through the connections you see, through the things that you can help to not just curate, but originate, to lay the seeds, to get seeds going and growing, that you're helping to lead us into innovation in new ways into the future.
In terms of the analogy of Pied Piper, the
right.
music always comes from the artists. And they are the ones that if we're lucky, make the magic. My job is in the background to try and create the best possible environment for them to make magic.
Beautifully said. Thanks for chatting with me today.
It's been an absolute pleasure. And I feel like you're a kindred spirit.
Once again, I'm Charlie Melcher, and this has been the FoST Podcast. A big thank you to Alex Poots for joining me today. His work at The Shed is a powerful example of what's possible when we create spaces that invite experimentation, collaboration, and artistic risk-taking. Now, for those of you who don't know, I have a book coming out on November 4th entitled The Future of Storytelling: How Immersive Experiences Are Transforming Our World. It's available for pre-order now wherever books are for sale, or you can learn more about it by visiting our website at FoST.org. The FoST Podcast is produced by Melcher Media in collaboration with our talented production partners, Charts and Leisure. Hope to see you again soon for another deep dive into the world of storytelling. Until then, please be safe, stay strong, and story on.